We do this in every meeting we're in, whether we just met somebody for the first time or it's a leadership meeting that's been going on for years at this point in time. We talk about what's the outcome for this conversation and we start there. And that has been a really profound practice for us over the last few years. It changes the nature of a conversation, it changes the focus of a conversation, but it also sets the intention. And it gives us a space to go back to later to say, are we actually on track to achieve the outcome we set at the beginning of this meeting or not?
Seen any good movies lately?
Oh gosh. No. I actually haven't seen a lot of movies lately. And yeah, I've been on a lot of flights lately. We've been traveling a ton, both personally and professionally. But I have found that it's almost like there's so many movies that it's almost hard to choose. Like, what do I really want to focus on? But I actually have been I just rewatched the entirety of Ted Lasso. Uh,
Oh,
which is just like maybe something I should do every year. In part, as I get older, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, have I seen this before? Like, yes, I have. Um, but it's just such a, makes you happy. And Roy Kent might be one of my favorite characters of all time. Yeah, it's just like, it's just a feel good show in so
yeah.
many ways that you probably shouldn't share with your younger children for the extreme amounts of vulgarity and things that are in it. However, a show about kindness, who doesn't like that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been watching the new season of Love on the Spectrum,
Yeah.
which is just the best. It's just the most delightful, lovely,
It's
kind,
heartwarming.
heartwarming show. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And I love Ted Lasso. That's come up a lot in our client calls lately. I feel like I've told a lot of clients to watch that show because I think it also teaches so much about leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. So highly recommend. Well, listeners, welcome to another episode of Business Velocity.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. You and I haven't changed outfits since episode 9.
Look at us. We're recording two on the same day.
Look at that. Welcome to episode 10. Today we are going to do our usual format. So, for those who are joining us for the first time, what we do is I have a case study prepared to present to Dave to get his reaction and feedback on based on very real clients. These are very fake companies, but based on very real clients and real struggles. And we would sort of treat this as if we were on a potential client call and how would we prescribe and help with their issues. So, without further ado, shall we?
We shall.
Let's do it. All right, today we are talking about Evergreen Home Company. They are a 35-person business. They design and sell high-end outdoor furniture, and they've been growing pretty quickly over the last couple of years. At some point, things started to feel pretty chaotic and disorganized, so leadership decided to get more structured, and now they have a lot of meetings.
Ooh.
They have a weekly leadership meeting, a marketing meeting, a sales meeting, an operations meeting, a cross-functional check-ins, multiple cross-functional check-ins, and a bunch of ad hoc conversations throughout the week that are all trying to keep them in sync. And honestly, they are talking all the time. The meetings themselves aren't bad. People are engaged, people share good ideas, they feel productive and in the moment, and decisions are being discussed. But outside of the meetings, projects are stalling or moving slower than ever. Priorities seem to shift midweek. Teams leave meetings and then interpret things differently. And the same topics keep coming back up over and over and over again. So there's this underlying feeling of we're busy, we talked about it, but what is happening? And what's interesting is like the leadership team is starting to feel like the weight of all of this. Why does it feel like we're always talking about the work but not getting it done? Didn't we already decide this? I know that's a thing that you and I have heard a lot from past clients. Why do we keep having the same conversations every week? And the team, they say things like, I'm in meetings all day. When do I actually do my job? I'm not totally sure what the final decision was. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And, the tried and true, are we doing this or are we waiting? Again, what's happening? So, today, you and I are going to talk about this evergreen home company that has a lot of meeting and very little movement.
Ooh. Honestly, the most telling thing I think you said in that description, and I just started like jotting down notes because there was a lot in there. You said they discuss a lot of decisions.
Yep.
That alerted me right away to, oh, we're having good conversations and maybe we're really friendly with each other, but we're discussing decisions, not necessarily making them.
Hmm.
So I'd love to think about, well, what's a meeting for? Right? If we really ask that question, what's a meeting for? And maybe before we go down like what's a meeting for, it's let's maybe dispel the myth that meetings are either good or bad, meaning like meetings are the worst. There's kind of a polarization, there's a binary nature to the meetings. Like either you love them or you hate them. It's like cilantro, right? Like either you love a meeting or you hate a meeting. But the truth is, meetings are absolutely important and necessary in order to share, spread information across the organization, to make decisions and to hold people to account to getting things done. If you have a meeting structure and a meeting cadence and you know what the meeting is for and it is designed accordingly, you will have great meetings and you will do things well. If none of that is true, or even just pieces of that are true, meetings can feel okay, but not actually do the things that you want them to do. And you start to then perpetuate the story that, wow, we're just in meetings all the time. We never get anything done and it sucks. I don't even want to be in this meeting anymore. Right.
Hmm.
Maybe lastly, there is the tragic version of like sometimes meetings are just a platform for one person to share and talk about all the things that they want to talk about, and nobody else ever gets to say anything. And it is truly miserable and a waste of time. And this could have been an email. I mean, think about all the things that you've heard. What comes to your mind, Hannah?
I think it's one of my favorite dichotomies about people, actually. I
Hmm.
think all people want to be heard and they also want to be told what to do.
Hmm.
I think everyone wants both things because if we are not being heard in any way and we don't get a chance to communicate, to meet, to talk, to be human with each other, or we don't get enough of it, then we build resentment, we feel left out, and when decisions are made, we feel like, well, but I didn't get to share my piece of that or inform that decision with my experience. And
Yeah.
then people wanting to be told what to do. Now, this one is tricky, but I do think it's true because if you just spin your wheels and you just listen to people all the time as a leader, and you don't then synthesize what you're hearing and say, okay, great, I have heard from all of my team and now here's what we're going to do, then they're going to get so frustrated and so exhausted by, well, no one actually made a decision, and they're going to start blaming each other for decisions that weren't made. So people do ultimately want to be told what to do. And so there's a pain in underdoing those two things, and there's a pain in overdoing those two things. And finding the balance of hearing people and telling them what to do is the trickiest thing we have to achieve as leaders. But
Yeah.
it's so impactful and amazing when you find that balance.
Well, and maybe just a nuance to being, told what to do. I would articulate that is that there's clarity in what you need to do, right? It's
Sure.
not unclear.
Yeah.
So that doesn't necessarily mean like authoritative directive, like somebody's telling you what to do in a meeting. I think what you're saying is that it is clarity of, okay, this is what needs to happen and who's doing what by when. And we're
Yeah.
clarifying those things. One of the things we talk about as a pain point in organizations, we've used this over the course of this set of podcasts. I won't belabor this part a whole lot, but we do talk about clarity, alignment, and execution. Clarity is, where are we going? What's it for? That's the kind of vision, future oriented work. Alignment is very strategic in nature, right? How do we do it? What are the pieces? How does it work? What are the systems? What are the structures? And execution is who's doing what by when. And what we often see is we call them the conversations because there are three layers that take place in an organization, and everybody has access and can see those layers and needs to understand what's happening in each of those three layers. And we often bring one of those lenses into a meeting depending upon where we sit in the organization. And those three conversations are a little bit like, the north south or the south south of a magnet. I can't remember which way it goes, where they resist each other, right? If I'm in a meeting and the owner or the CEO or the leadership team or however the meeting is talking about clarity, but I'm execution focused and all I want to know is, yeah, but who's doing what by when? Or I'm the alignment person, I'm thinking about, yeah, but how are we going to do that? And does that match the strategy that we're doing? We're having three different conversations in that meeting, and that meeting, no matter what, will be frustrating. We have a meeting structure that we use called ACE meetings. And ACE meetings are really about alignment, clarity, and execution, understanding fundamentally going back to that first piece. What's the meeting for? Is this an execution conversation where we're talking about who's doing what by when? Is this a clarity conversation where we're more vision, ideation, future oriented? Or is this an alignment meeting where we're talking about strategy, goals, targets, and a little bit higher level? And if you have intent and you've generated a kind of cadence to those conversations, you will start to see an impact on how you converse, how you talk, and how you flow through a meeting. And you'll start to see the impact of those meetings increase.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is north-south of a magnet that are drawn to each other. And I think
Okay, thank you.
actually but that really flows with what you're saying. North being clarity, south being execution. Those two things are drawn to each other. And when there's too much of one or the other, there is a resistance and there is a chaos that can happen. If you're just executing all the time, everybody's going to be asking why. If you're just clarifying all the time, everybody's going to be asking what? Like, what are we actually doing?
Or when.
Or when? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So my question to you is, if you sat in on one of these meetings with this team, what would you be listening for to know exactly like where it's breaking down?
Yeah, great question. There's three O's that come to mind. There's outcomes, obstacles, and opportunities. Uh, Outcomes are what's the meeting for? What's the outcome of this conversation? And we need to be really clear on what that is. Hannah, I know you and I do this, and we've built the habit and built the skill of doing this over time. We do this in every meeting we're in, whether we just met somebody for the first time or it's a leadership meeting that's been going on for years at this point in time. We talk about what's the outcome for this conversation and we start there. And that has been a really profound practice for us over the last few years. It changes the nature of a conversation, it changes the focus of a conversation, but it also sets the intention. And it gives us a space to go back to later to say, are we actually on track to achieve the outcome we set at the beginning of this meeting or not? So if we drift off track in a new conversation or in a team meeting, it's like, hey, are we actually achieving the outcome? It gives us that anchor point. A lot of meetings are report out, informative. Hey, just so you guys know, here's what's going on with X, Y, and Z. Fine, that's fine. But it's not really what makes a meeting powerful or important. It is uncovering and exploring obstacles and opportunities. Obstacles are issues, challenges, barriers to being able to do the things that you need to do in an execution conversation. And opportunities are, hey, here's a thing that we can explore. Here's a path that we can take. Here's where we can go. So when you think about outcomes, obstacles, and opportunities, those are really important components and focuses of a conversation. I'm going to also add that, clarity, alignment, and execution show up in meeting cadences, right? And you almost always want to end with execution. You want to start with clarity, and you want to end with execution. Clarity is why are we here, right? And you want to end with and who's doing what by when, and capturing to-dos, who do we need to communicate to, who wasn't here that needs to be informed. And those touch points, that formality at the end of a conversation is quite literally transformative. If you have a really great conversation and, coming back to what you said about this group, they discuss decisions. It's like, well, if at the end you're saying, well, who's doing what by when, and you've only discussed the decision, it'll become very apparent that we didn't actually decide anything.
Yeah,
We
and
still need to make a decision. So
yeah.
ending a meeting with who's doing what by when and who needs to know what's going on based on the conversation that we had forces you as a team to then actually decide things that you haven't yet decided.
Yes. And I'm going to scream this from the rooftops. Don't ask that question in the last 5 minutes, because then you're going to scramble to identify who's doing what by when. When it comes to clarifying who's doing what by when, give that its time as well. Make sure that your meeting is not 95% discussing and 5% operationalizing, make sure that it is much more weighted toward like a 60-40. Like sure, you need time to understand what's the issue, what are our options, which way could this go, why are we doing it, all of that. But then at least 40% of your meeting has to be, okay, how are we operationalizing that and looking ahead and making the plan? Or you have a dedicated planning meeting for whatever was decided. And that's the piece that I see jumped past so quickly by leadership because that is hard. It is hard to actually make a plan for operationalizing the decisions that you make. There are lots of details and nuances and people who have to be consulted and questions that have to be asked, even after you've made a decision. But a good planning or a good alignment meeting will actually make the thing that you have decided happen and it will make it successful. So please make sure, because I've been in so many meetings where this happens, where just we talk about stuff for, 52 minutes. And then on minute 53, they go, okay, who's doing what by when? And then it's 7 minutes of, I guess I could do this and then I could do that. And then, but I mean, maybe, so it's super important to make sure that you're not just cramming that in at the end and making sure that you give that alignment piece, that planning piece, it's due and it's time.
Yep. No, I can agree more. The other piece, if most of the organizations we talk to say some variation of like, well, we lack accountability.
Hmm.
We lack accountability. We'll have a conversation, and then and you gave it in this example, in this case study. We'll have a conversation, and then we'll go away. We don't really know if it happened, and we don't really know, kind of where it ended up. And then it's, well, let's see, might have to check in with that person. It's like, well, yeah, but we're not holding people accountable. Simplest version of holding people accountable is documenting who's doing what by when at the end of a meeting. And then in the next meeting, you start with your vision connection and kind of that high level, like, what's this meeting for? What are we doing? Hey, did we get our stuff done from last week? Let's look at it. It is that simple to add accountability to your organization. I know that sounds overly simplified, but it truly works, because if you have somebody that consistently 2 weeks, 3 weeks in a row hasn't done their stuff and everybody else has, you now have social accountability. Oh, look, everybody else is doing their stuff and this person isn't. They know that. They notice. They are very aware that they are the person that is not getting the stuff done. And you will either see that person rise to the occasion or not. And
Hmm.
if they don't, you now have a different conversation that you can have with that person to raise accountability. But if you're not tracking stuff at the end of the meeting and you are not then coming into the next meeting saying, hey, did we actually get the stuff done or not? You won't have accountability because you don't have those bookends. It's really not complicated. It's about the discipline of having those pieces in place. And I want to speak to discipline real quickly.
Hmm.
It is not as hard as it sounds. Probably one of the prouder moments I've had in my life as a consultant is I've trained myself to say, and who's doing what by when. We've now incorporated it into agendas and the way we operate, but it took me a while to build that habit. That is not natural or normal for me. It's actually the part of the meeting that is the most work for me personally, is to document those things. We were on a client site and they said, I'm going to channel my inner Dave here. Who's doing what by when? And I was like, oh, thank you. I've done the work, right, of disciplining myself to say that. And you just build the habit and the ritual. Just practice saying it, practice documenting, and then practice coming back to it. It will be a skill that you will value in your organization over the course of however long you're there running meetings, doing the work that you need to do. Who's doing what by when?
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I'm thinking about with this case study in particular is, so it's a team of about 30 people and they're making furniture. So I would imagine they have a lot of like people who are actually fulfilling those orders,
Out on the
probably
floor.
several people who are like salespeople as well. So one thing that we see in small businesses a lot is a small leadership team, if not a 1 or 2 person leadership team. And in order for them to feel confident in the decisions that they make, they consult everyone. They bring everyone in. And that can sometimes be the kiss of death because then you're sort of ruling by committee. And so the other thing that I think I want to touch on is the balance of who needs to be on your leadership team, being really intentional about like that core group of people and establishing their yes authority up above over the people who report to them and helping them understand and helping yourself understand like what is truly being asked of them. Like we need a core group of leadership folks who are invited to a leadership meeting who make decisions. Sure, they absolutely bring in the experience and the consultation of other people on the team, but the reason why we get paid what we get paid as leaders is to make the decisions. Looking to your entire small business team to make decisions as one is quite unfair as a leader. And so, for anyone who might be listening to this, who is a small business leader, be careful about who you have in your leadership team, be intentional about it, and avoid the gigantic group meetings that become more like therapy sessions than they are true leadership meetings that then become operationalized once you make a decision. I think that's like a big thing that we see pretty often with our clients.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of comes back to the weave of a few things, right? So you have the meeting, but the meeting should be a microcosm of other design elements that you've done, right? It's actually the formal application of certain things that you've done from a design perspective. One of those is the core role chart, right? Which is who's responsible for what in the organization, and are we really clear on that? And do we have a RACI chart? Like, do we understand who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed around these particular areas within the business? If you've done that work, it starts to become fairly obvious who's in what conversation, and you design the rhythm of the business for the organization, right? Like, what's the meeting cadence? What do weekly meetings look like, monthly meetings, quarterly and annual, and who needs to be involved in those? I think to your point, Hannah, there is a certain level of, oh, well, let's have a meeting about X. And then we just willy nilly invite folks, or we just invite folks because we feel like we should, but we haven't done the work of designing, well, who's responsible for this, who's accountable, who's consultant informed, and what should their role in this meeting be? What's the frequency or the cadence of this meeting? Again, not rocket science, not terribly complicated. Honestly, it's about that pausing and reflecting and designing to say, what is the rhythm of the business? Who does need to be in these meetings? Who are the decision makers? And taking that time to design who's in what conversation, who has, what we need to inform. Maybe the last thing I'll say about meetings based on what they talked about, because it wasn't so much in your case study, but I think it's an important component of thinking about the decision component, right? You said decisions get discussed. And I want to talk about a couple pitfalls in decision making in a meeting. One of those is confusing consensus and alignment. We talk a lot about the difference between consensus and alignment, and we are always going to shoot for alignment in a conversation around decisions. Consensus is everybody has to agree. And that is a really difficult task, number one. And two, it doesn't always lead to good decisions. It will actually water down some of the best decisions that you can make, in part because you're making sure that everybody feels okay with that decision. Truly, if you are making good decisions and you are making the best decisions for your business, some people might not like it. It might not be their favorite choice, or it might not be something that they agree with. That's okay. It's okay to have a disagreement. It's okay not to agree with each other around a decision. It is not okay not to decide. So consensus often leads to indecision or really slow decision making or watered down decisions. I get the intent behind consensus is let's make sure everybody's okay. We want to culturally make sure. Great. I get everything about that. That's not a bad thing. But consensus can create those challenges within decisions. So we shoot for alignment, which is I don't have to agree, but I'll commit. And to get to alignment, it's about hearing people. It's about making sure that input is there, making sure that everybody got to say what they needed to say, who's involved in that conversation, who has weight or connectedness to that decision, and then looking at the person who owns that decision and saying, what's the decision? What do we do? And I don't have to agree with it, but I need to commit. So consensus and alignment are an important distinction to understand when you think about decision making in your meetings. And I know you and I run into that all the time.
No, it's a big one. It's a big one for sure. And it's an art, but it can be practiced and can be learned
Mhm.
for sure. I think the last thing I would say to Evergreen Home Company
Evergreen.
is one of the last things that they mentioned that their employees say was that I'm not totally sure what the final decision was. Are we doing this or are we waiting? And I would just really reiterate the importance of reiterating what the decision was. And what the action items are. Like you're saying, write it down, share it with people, make sure that we're clear at the end of that meeting what the final decision is. And as leaders, just be prepared to say it over and over again. You're probably going to have to clarify with people. People hear things differently, and we have to make sure that we as leadership team meeting heard the same thing so that we can go out and clarify with everyone across the organization.
I was in a training at one point in time, and a phrase came up that I thought was really powerful, and it said, "Indecision is a decision. Deciding not to decide. If we decide, oh, well, we'll get to that later, that's a decision. That's a choice that we're making. The purpose of being in a meeting with people is to decide things, right? Make decisions, make action plans, and go. And that's really what it's about. Indecision is probably part of the reason why Evergreen is having a hard time. And it's part of the reason why they're having a hard time holding people accountable. It's part of the reason why people are saying, like, we're having too many meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't feel useful, and people can tell. People can pick up on it for sure.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Business Velocity. We're very grateful that you joined us for this one. We hope this was beneficial, and that we hope this improves the quality of your meetings. We do have meeting templates. If you would be interested in utilizing those, we'll make a downloadable PDF version of those available in the show notes. So you can check those out. Those are our ACE meetings, the ones that Dave mentioned, clarity, alignment, and execution meetings. We hope they help, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us on Business Velocity. Today's insights are just the beginning of enhancing your business's momentum. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also explore our framework at theevolveddifference.com. And remember, the time is now to take these strategies and apply your learning and achieve velocity. See you next time.